All right, let's pivot back to football and hit on something that Lions fans have been quietly stressing about, because I think this matters more than people want to admit, at least at the organizational level. And so we've got to talk about Sam LaPorta, that injury, and what this actually means for the Lions heading into the 2026 season, not just emotionally, but structurally, schematically, and long term. And so first off, I think we need to acknowledge the obvious. Anytime your all-pro caliber tight end goes down, the reaction is going to be immediate panic. And I get it, because LaPorta isn't just a good player. He's central to how this offense functions. And when Detroit decided to let go of Hawkinson to Minnesota, I think people were freaking out then. But Sam LaPorta has been a very obvious upgrade. I mean, this guy's a stud. I mean, he's not just a luxury piece, he's a load-bearing wall. And in the NFL, I just, he's in the top 10. There's not a lot of other tight ends I would put into the LaPorta conversation. I mean, you're talking about Kittle, Trey McBride. I mean, you're talking about a handful. And so when news of this injury dropped, the question wasn't how bad is it? It's how much does this change what the Lions can do next year? And so the good news is this. Nothing about LaPorta's situation suggests a career-altering issue. So I think we can all take a breath there. I don't think this is one of those injuries based on reporting where you start worrying about explosiveness permanently disappearing or long-term availability becoming a yearly conversation, because that does happen to players in the NFL. I mean, I'm not going to go through the list, but we can obviously go through the list of players that have had excruciating injuries and they're just not the same player. I don't think that's the situation here. So realistically, we're talking about a recovery timeline that fits cleanly into the offseason window. And assuming no setbacks, LaPorta should be ready well before the 2026 season ramps up, with training camp being the realistic checkpoint, not a week one panic situation. And that matters a great deal because the Lions don't need to rush him. This team is in a position now where they can afford to be smart. They're not chasing relevance. They're chasing sustainability. And I've talked about that in some of my other segments about why Detroit is making the moves it's making this offseason. They're not trying to build the reputation. They've got one. They're trying to win a Super Bowl now. That's where we're at. Full stop. And so protecting LaPorta long term is going to be far more important than squeezing reps out of him early on in the calendar year, even if he does have to sit week one. But I think here's where it gets interesting, because even if LaPorta is back on schedule, the injury still forces Detroit to ask a bigger question about backups and depth to that position. And so, do they need more at tight end? And I think the answer is yes. Because it's not that LaPorta isn't enough. He's a great player. But because the way this offense is evolving, I think it's going to demand it. And especially now with Drew Petzing in the picture. Because if you've watched Petzing's offenses closely, one thing jumps out immediately. And it's that tight ends aren't accessories. They're focal points. In Arizona, Trey McBride wasn't just used. He was a featured player. Motion, mismatches, option routes, seam stress. Guy had tons of priority in the red zone. I mean, McBride was treated like a primary weapon, not a safety valve. And you see that differing philosophy across teams in the NFL. Obviously, with Petzing, that's not accidental. That's how he feels about it. That's his football philosophy for that role. Drew Petzing wants tight ends who can stay on the field in all situations. I think he wants defenses guessing. Is this 12 personnel or 11? Is the tight end blocking or flexed wide? That ambiguity is the entire point. And Sam LaPorta is basically the perfect prototype for that system. And I think that's why, ironically, that this injury may push Detroit to add a tight end rather than sit comfortably. I mean, we just saw that with the Kafka news. Now they've basically got two OCs. Now, Kafka isn't going to be their OC, but he's going to be a high-ranking personnel position in the offense. Why did they do that? Well, reasonable minds can deduce that they don't want to lose coordinators anymore. And so if they've got two of them, then they're insulated. And so I'm kind of starting to feel like the same thing is going to happen to the tight end position. Not because they're worried about Sam LaPorta, but because they now fully understand how valuable that position is going to be in this scheme. And so do we think that they're going to make a move in free agency? I think possibly, but I wouldn't expect a splashy headline name for this position because of who they've got already. And we know that this front office doesn't overpay for redundancy in certain positions. If they go veteran, it's going to be somebody reliable, somebody who can block, catch, and hold up if asked to play meaningful snaps for a few weeks if LaPorta goes down again. I'm thinking more along the lines of stabilizer, not star. But the draft, though, I feel a little bit differently about that. Mostly because this upcoming tight end class has a lot of depth and not necessarily a bunch of LaPorta level prospects. Those don't grow on trees, as you know, but players who can develop into legitimate TE2s with upside, those are available. And so if Detroit can find someone who fits Petzing's versatility requirements, I think you're suddenly talking about an offense that can live with two tight end sets without losing speed or creativity. And that, I got to tell you, that would be terrifying for most NFL defenses. Because imagine this, and stay with me a minute. Okay, let's imagine LaPorta healthy, aligned everywhere from inline to the slot, and paired with another tight end who can force linebackers to stay honest. I mean, that opens up everything else. It makes life easier for Goff. It creates cleaner looks for the receivers. It keeps Detroit's run game unpredictable. I mean, that's how modern, efficient offenses are built. And so when people ask, does Sam LaPorta's injury change the Lions' plans? I think the answer is yes, but not in a bad way. I think it accelerates conversations that they were probably going to have anyways. Now, obviously, Sam LaPorta is still the guy. He's the foundational part of their offense. And nothing about 2026 should make Lions fans nervous about his role or his production or his future for that matter. But if anything, it just reinforces how important he is and how smart Detroit would be to insulate that given the importance by building depth behind him. I mean, we just don't want to be in another situation where we lose Sam LaPorta in 2026 and we don't really have anybody. And so if Drew Petzing gets the personnel he wants, if he gets his version of the McBride blueprint, plus LaPorta's already elite skill set, then this offense could get even more dangerous than it already is. And so sometimes injuries expose weaknesses. Sometimes they clarify priorities. And I think for Detroit, this feels like the latter. And that's why heading into 2026, this isn't a setback story. This is a setup one. Keep it locked. You're listening to Midnight Sports Detroit.